So Shanghai Disneyland is set to reopen next Monday, May the 11th. However, let's also discuss what this news does and does not mean for the rest of the Disney parks around the world with regards to their eventual reopening and also the overall health of the company. So let's dive into all of that up next. Hi there Waltoneers, I'm Jack and this is of course DSNY Newscast, and for today, let's get straight into it. As yesterday, the Walt Disney Company held their Q2 earnings call, and it provided a lot of new information and most importantly insight to their strategy for reopening within this current climate. As in recent weeks, there's been more than enough idle speculation from market analysts, reporters and bloggers alike on what Disney should or should not do when it comes to the reopening. However, we now have an official indication of their overall direction, and the reason why I only say indication is because we now know some of the measures that will be enacted when Shanghai Disneyland reopens next week, with this being a sort of blueprint for an eventual reopening of other Disney parks around the world. However, for today, we're only going to be dealing with the facts from the earnings call and none of the ramble and speculation. So let's begin. As Disney CEO Bob Chapek stated that there will be control capacity restrictions on the amount of guests admitted into the park, with Chapek disclosing that Shanghai Disneyland's maximum operational capacity pre-pandemic being around 80,000 guests, whereas the new maximum capacity issued by the Chinese government that has a shared ownership in the park is 24,000 guests, which means that it will operate at exactly 30% of its original capacity. However, Disney will be showing extreme caution with all of this and will not be admitting 24,000 guests this coming Monday, but instead they will begin with a much smaller number and then over time increase the capacity to 24,000. And the reason why Disney will be using this tiered capacity progression is that they will be rolling out new measures and systems to adhere to strict social distancing guidelines that will require a period of test and adjustment, with the measures being as follows. Most attractions will reopen with new queue social distancing markers in place, as can be seen here, and where suitable, virtual queuing will be explored for certain attractions. However, children's play areas and any indoor theatre attractions will remain closed for the time being. Parades and nighttime spectaculars will not be presented to further encourage social distancing, but an evening light show and a character procession will continue. Then when it comes to characters, there will also be no character meet and greets to begin with, although characters will appear in the parks in a brand new way that will adhere to social distance. And face masks will be a mandatory requirement for all guests and cast members at all times, with the only exception being whilst inside a dining venue. So those are the measures that we've had officially confirmed so far. But of course, we'll have to wait till next week to see the measures enacted and most likely other modifications to the overall experience at Shanghai Disneyland. But all of that only pertains to guests once they're inside the park, whereas we all know that the entry and admission process will be the most critical to ensuring guest safety. And so to help mitigate any issues, Disney will only be using dated tickets that will have a limited allocation per day, combined with a reservation system for guest entry, with this reservation system to stagger park entry into select groups, to ensure that there's suitable capacity for the health and temperature checks on arrival, and also to avoid mass gatherings which would cause an overflow within the new marker-appointed queue spaces outside the main gates. And there will also be an integration with the Shanghai government-issued contact tracing app as part of the early detection system for new coronavirus cases. However, it should be noted that once again, this is very much a flexible environment where new measures will be introduced and modified depending on real-world workability. But at this point, you're probably wondering what all this means for Disneyland and Walt Disney World. And well, despite Shanghai Disneyland's reopening being a glimmer of hope for a return of some sort of normalcy in the near future, I recommend that we all practice cautious optimism, as a lot of operational lessons will be learnt within the coming weeks over at Shanghai Disneyland, and thus it does not mean that a reopening of the domestic parks is imminent within May. As Chapek reiterated the sentiments made on the Orange County and Reopening Florida Task Force, that just because Disney is accepting bookings for June 1st, it does not mean that they will be reopened by the 1st of June, but instead there was no disclosure of any timeline or tentative reopening date. So any predictions or headlines by news sources for a reopening remain speculative for the time being. But what this does mean for Walt Disney World and Disneyland is that that Disney can begin to test what works and what doesn't work in preparation for similar measures within the domestic parks, as of course Disney will need to make big adjustments for the inevitable cultural and climate-based differences. As all of this has been hinted at within the Disney Parks blog post by Disney's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Pamela Heimel, as there will be a phased reopening, physical distancing and capacity measures, enhanced hygiene and sanitation, and of course screening procedures as well. Although the one definitive statement that Chapek did make with regards to reopening within the United States was that there will be a phased reopening that will most likely begin with downtown Disney and Disney Springs retail and dining districts to begin with, and then it will be later followed by the parks, with the Disney Cruise Line to be the last segment to resume operation. However, despite all of this being another great indicator of the general direction, we'll have to wait a little longer for specifics regarding the US Disney Park implementation, as not all measures within Shanghai Disneyland will be applicable for the domestic parks. And also, Disneyland and Walt Disney World are better equipped to handle the setup of virtual queuing, since they have prior experience with Rise of Resistance and Galaxy's Edge's boarding groups. So that's where I'm going to leave that news regarding the measures that are going to be implemented next week at Shanghai Disneyland, as I really don't want to tiptoe into speculation territory, as I feel that it really doesn't serve much purpose than just to add additional noise to the topic, especially when it's as serious and as important as Disney reopening within a global pandemic. So with that being said, let's turn our attention to the other information that was revealed on the Disney earnings call. And the first thing that needs to be made very clear is that the main economic impact and disruption of COVID-19 on the Walt Disney Company is not truly reflected within this second quarter, as it only pertains to the months of January, February and March. Whereas, despite the Asian Disney parks of Shanghai, Hong Kong and Tokyo closing on January the 25th, 26th and February the 29th respectively, Disneyland, Walt Disney World, Disneyland Paris and Disney Cruise Line remained unaffected in their continued operations until the second week of March. So this means that the third quarter, which will be reported in August, will be the quarter that will bear the brunt of the fiscal impact regarding COVID-19. And that is of course assuming that there is no need for a further closure in the fall period due to a secondary spike in coronavirus cases. But overall, the second quarter results were fairly strong, with revenues for the entire company beating analyst expectations, standing at $18 billion for the 3 months. Although Disney Parks Experiences and Products was down 10% within the quarter compared to last year, bringing in a total of $5.543 billion in revenue. However, Disney did state that the disruption of COVID-19 on the entire company within this quarter was a loss of $1.4 billion, with Disney Parks Experiences and Products accounting for $1 billion of that overall number, which means that we should be prepared for a massive loss within the third quarter. Now, to dive down a little bit deeper into that $1 billion number, it was mentioned by Chapek that roughly half of that is to be attributed to the closure of the domestic parks for the 2-week period that fell within the second quarter. And despite wanting to use that number to forecast the loss that we can expect within quarter 3, unfortunately it would not be responsible, as that $500 million also includes Disney continuing to pay approximately 100,000 cast members at full salary through the end of March, and also the simple fact that we just don't know when the parks will reopen. But there was one more big economic detail on this earnings call, and that is that Disney will be looking to make a saving of $900 million within the parks and resorts segment, with a reduction in capital expenditure on construction and refurbishment projects through the end of the fiscal year, which means that Disney is trying to contain the negative impact of COVID-19 within the fiscal year of 2020 that ends on September 26th. But despite all the parks potentially reopening this summer, not all of the existing Disney park construction and refurbishment projects will resume operation until the end of September, which means that we can expect significant delays. Although it should be mentioned that Bob Chapek did restate a commitment to big plans that they have for the parks worldwide, and many projects will continue, albeit with a fine-tooth comb over those budgets. So in conclusion to all of this, the cautious approach of reopening the parks combined kind of extensive measures means that Disney will be best equipped to bounce back in a strong way, beginning at the end of September into the new fiscal year of 2021. So that's everything that we know so far with regards to Disney's approach to their reopening, which will begin with Shanghai Disneyland. But now it's over to you, the Waltoniers, as I would like to know what's your thoughts and opinions on this reopening of Shanghai Disneyland. Do you think that the measures go far enough, and what measures would you be happy to see within Walt Disney World or Disneyland when they do reopen the domestic parks? And of course, don't forget to put the timestamp for where the hidden Mickey appeared somewhere within this video, along with your suggestion or your comment, to be in the chance to win one of these official DSNY Newscast enamel pins. And congratulations to this Waltonier here for winning this suggestion from a previous video where I did an op-ed armchair Imagineering piece for the argument for WALL-E to be integrated at Walt Disney World. And so that's it for today, so be sure to go ahead and subscribe down below if you're new to this channel, turn on the notifications on YouTube so that you always receive an update whenever I release a new video, and also if you've enjoyed today's video, which is a bit of good news about Shanghai Disneyland reopening, then be sure to give this video a massive thumbs up, as it really does help this channel out. And I've been Jack, you've been you, and I'll see you real soon.